Okay, welcome everybody. It's an honor to have the first talk here, a talk on a new project of the IGS, which is the IGS HMR monitoring project. So why monitoring? So as we see every day, the landscape is still changing, GNSS landscape. We get new constellations operational with new signals, new frequencies and new services. The benefit for the user comes, of course, by using all these systems as one system. And for that, of course, the need of the users is to have these systems monitored in a homogeneous way. So monitored with identical algorithms and procedures, monitoring of the status, broadcast performance, and so on. And for that, it was decided that international organizations should be engaged, so that not individual providers should do the monitoring, they monitor their system, but there should be an overarching monitoring. That's where the IGS then enters. So there was a task force formed at the International GNSS Monitoring and Assessment Task Force, established in the working group A of the International Committee on GNSS in 2011. And this task force is co-chaired by ICG and IGS. The tasks are to determine what parameters should be monitored and whether there are gaps in the monitoring or also in the assessment methodologies, and to propose an organizational approach, avoiding also the duplication of existing activities. So for instance, to use existing infrastructure, as well as to explore methods to disseminate the monitoring results to the users. And the ICG urged IGS to commence a pilot project and to join with the monitoring and assessment activities, the pilot project, so that also ICG joins the IGS pilot project. I want to show here quickly the current status of the IGS NGEX tracking network when we are talking about existing infrastructure. So I have currently, so these are the stations which are just operational, more than 200 multi-GNSS stations nicely covering the globe. So we should use those for all activities. So it was then decided to launch a project. So the terms of references written, as one usually starts a project, is writing terms of references and so on. And then two parallel calls for participation were issued. The original idea was to have one call, so that all participants of the project would join the same project. This was then not possible due to different reasons. So but there were two calls, one within the IGS and the other one within the ICG. The call that I'm now talking about the IGS calls. The call for participation was seeking for observation sites, new additional sites to be added to the IGS network, data centers holding monitoring products, and then mainly, the most important, the monitoring analysis centers, as well as a monitoring analysis center coordinator. At the last governing board meeting in December, working group and pilot project were installed, in fact. So what are the tasks then of the IGS pilot project? So of course to contribute to the joint pilot project. So the pilot project is called pilot project in the ICG, but it's actually the same. And the task is to monitor all GNSS with the same methodology. So the broadcast information of GPS, GLONASS, Galileo Beta, QCSS, and later also NAVIC. First, restricting to a set of parameters, so not doing everything at the same time, namely broadcast orbits and clocks, signal in space user range error, signal in space user UTC offset error, and PDOC for defined sites. Also initially, the activities will be offline with a target to go from near real time or maybe even real time. It's of course essential, so I think that's certainly the first task within the working group, to get a common understanding, not only in the working group but more generally, that everybody knows that we are talking about the same thing. So signal in space is signal in space, that's I think quite well defined, but if different groups determine signal in space and get different results, so we have to discuss in much detail what do we mean about these parameters before then combining them, for instance. And within the IGS project, of course, we should also assess alternative monitoring parameters. So we can be much more open than what is defined in the terms of reference. And eventually, one should also evaluate the user needs. The call for participation was issued, and there was a nice participation. I have here the list of the groups that sent a proposal. There were 17 proposals received. The numbers here, I have to say, that's not the number of the submission. It's also not any other number, alphabetic number, whatever. It's simply the number in which I found them, the order in which I found them in my mailbox. And some of them I overlooked, so they can't then read later. For instance, Wuhan was very early, now it appears late because I overlooked the mail. But it's very nice, and that's of course, this was one of the targets to engage new groups. About half of the groups are new in the IGS, so that's of course very nice to have new groups engaged. I have also to say that the activity is open, so if any group decides to join, they are always welcome, so it's not closed, so you can always submit a proposal. Here I have an overview of where these groups are located. It's still somewhat centered in Europe. There are 4 groups in North America, 2 on Southern Hemisphere, and also 3 in the Far East and 1 in the Middle East. Here you can see what these groups propose to do. So we have a number of groups proposing additional stations which will be added into the IGS network. 4 groups are ready to hold data products, and 12 groups are ready to do analysis, which is the most important part. We'll come back to that. 2 groups originally were ready to have the ACC. Then 1 proposal wasn't received, and so we have an ACC who is Tim Springer there in the back from ESOC. So many thanks for that, and we can now really start. Tim Springer should now be available. So that we can kick off the activities on that workshop. Of course, when setting up a pilot project, we should also discuss how we terminate it eventually. We terminate it if it's successful or if it fails. So when is it successful? Well, if we show that the pilot project is able to monitor the desired parameters, and there's also procedures defined to include new parameters or new groups, and that an organizational structure is set up that this the monitoring can be done as a service either inside or outside of the IGS. So this has then to be decided as part of our work. What is required to start or to do the work? Of course, we need, and that's one of the first things to discuss, we need reference products, and it's pretty clear that these reference products come from the IGS, from the MJECTS product, but from the Scalio products, they are not yet combined or so we have to discuss what will be the reference products to compare the broadcast with it. We need satellite operation information. For instance, the broadcast information is referring to the antenna phase center, while IGS products are referring to the center of mass. So we need to know the antenna center offset as well attitude and so on. This information should come from the providers. We need available the complete set of broadcast information as sent out by the satellites. Actually, we record the messages by the receiver, so we somehow also monitor the ground infrastructure, and we have to be sure that we get the information that the satellites broadcast. So, in fact, the RAINEX format should still be extended, for instance, to hold raw binary messages, such that we can really assess what we want to assess. And finally, of course, algorithms and tools have to be developed to really do the monitoring tasks. Okay, so that's last slide, summary. So the call for participation was issued, and 17 groups are participating. We can now start. It's a little bit slow. I'm always a little bit slow. That's why I'm also in the live streaming room. slow with registering the workshop also. But now is Tim Springer available. We want to start. There should be a splinter meeting tomorrow. I will send an agenda today, and then we can start with initial tasks, identification of reference solution, and so on. Kick off at the workshop, and then we will be ready, I guess, to present first results in December at the Garden Board meeting. Thank you very much.